My name is Jim Nielsen. I'm the chair of the Ashland Historical Commission, and welcome to tonight's hearing. I'm glad you could make it. I'm just going to start the meeting.
So we can hear. I can't hear.
You can't, who can't hear?
Started.
All the way in the back.
Can you hear me now?
Julie, can you hear us?
Okay. Can you hear me? Everybody on Zoom, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'm opening the public hearing. Notice is hereby given that the Ashland Historical Commission will be holding a public hearing on Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 at 7 p.m. in the Select Board Meeting Room at the Ashland Town Hall, 101 Main Street, Ashland, Mass. Persons wishing to be heard on this matter are invited to attend this in person or by logging into Zoom using the link below, which is posted on the town's website, www.ashlandmass.com. And then it gives the actual Zoom address. The purpose of the hearing is to discuss the proposed local historic district. Both the preliminary study report and a map are posted on the town's website, ashlandmass.com. Interested parties who are able to attend the hearing may submit written comments to the Ashland Historical Commission at historical@ashlandmass.com. And that's me. I want to explain to everybody that anybody who wants to speak, whether for or against, will be given a chance to speak. We have the room for a while. I'm not sure how many people will actually attend. I actually want to say this is the official hearing, but we're going to have another meeting on this. I'll just back up a little bit. The Historical Commission has been having meetings about this every week at their meeting, which is the second Tuesday of every month for the past 2 years. But we're going to have another. Hopefully I'll get a bigger room too for a hybrid meeting so people can come in person if they have any further questions, probably in March or April, closer to the town meeting. So if you don't have a question now and it pops up later, please feel free to call me or email me, or there's going to be another meeting, or please, you're all invited to come to the Ashland Historical Commission meetings. Now, I also asked that anybody speaking wait to be recognized by the chair, and I'd like to just do a little brief introduction and a little PowerPoint presentation that's very brief, just to give you a feel of what we're doing and what this is all about. All right. I'll back up a little bit. The Ashland Historical Commission was reestablished back in 2020, right before COVID. It had been vacant for a number of years due to disinterest or whatever have you. And the original commission got back together, and we spent all our time doing things. It took us a while to get reorganized, and a bunch of different topics came up. Mostly, what the mission of the Historical Commission is basically to preserve and to promote the historical and architectural features of Ashland. Now, in Ashland, a lot of these properties are quite spread out. The old farmhouses, because it was a rural town, and there's no cluster of a neighborhood of buildings and things like that that really define the town. They're all spread out one by one, and one by one we're losing those houses and all those old buildings. It really came to a head when the mill building project started, and we met with them, and there was one plan in the beginning. I don't want to rehash the whole thing. It's now a 40B project, and it's not in our control anymore, or anybody's control except the state, I guess, or whatever the town does. It's not the Historical Commission's purview anymore. But that's what started the ball rolling to see how you can protect a building in Ashland, a historic building in Ashland, a significant building in Ashland, from being demolished with no say from the town, what happens to it. And in order to do that, there's been several things proposed, but we did some research, and let me just tell you, by establishing a local historic district, municipalities highlight their town's character and history and protect them against inappropriate alterations and demolition. Created through the passage of a town bylaw, a local historic district requires that certain projects visible from the public way are reviewed by a locally appointed historic district commission. For example, if a property owner wants to add on to a building located in the district, the property owners must submit an application to the Historic District Commission. The Historic District Commission holds a public hearing and makes a determination based on the established guidelines on whether the new addition is appropriate. If the new addition is deemed appropriate, the Historic Commission issues a certificate of appropriateness, which allows the work to proceed. Local historic districts were established in Massachusetts in 1955 for Beacon Hill and Nantucket. The entire island of Nantucket is a historic district. The Historic Districts Act, Chapter 40C of the Massachusetts General Laws of 1960, amended 1975 and 83, is the enabling legislation for the creation of local historic districts. There are now more than 200 local historic districts in more than 120 municipalities in the Commonwealth. Neighboring towns with local historic districts include Framingham, Hopkinton, Medfield, Natick, Sherborne. We could go on. In Massachusetts, a historic district consists of a single building like 76 Main Street in Hopkinton, or an entire island, as is the case with Nantucket. Now, there's a couple of things we want to go through. We'll just start with the PowerPoint presentation. Well, we decided way back when that the only way we were going to preserve some of the buildings in the downtown was to create this district. It's the only way to prevent demolition of some of the buildings. Now, not everything in this proposed district is historic, but those are what they call placeholders. And if I'm not, I'll just introduce, on my right over here is our consultant that we hired. Her name is Stacy Spies, and she's a professional, what'd you call it, architect? And Stacy and the commission did a lot of research, and we had a whole study committee that vetted the research and discussed it, and this went on for, I would say, over 2 years. We had meetings, public meetings, every Ashland Historical Commission meeting this was talked about, and a while back, there was letters sent out to the owners of the property. What we decided, actually, it was because of the downtown area. It was not well, there is only one residence in the downtown area that this district is proposed for. The rest are businesses or public buildings. And most of the ones in the downtown area that we're trying to preserve are significant to Ashland. Not everything, like I said. And we'll just go through it here. Why create a local historic district? A local historic district is the only mechanism available to preserve historic buildings. To maintain the character of the downtown, Ashland's quickly losing its historical buildings. Demo delays and the National Registry, like the National Historic Register, what they do is they highlight it, but there's no mechanism in the National Register to basically preserve the building. So you can take it down.
You might want to move the bar there over to the right, so you can not. Oh, yeah, that's good. Well, lower down somehow.
How do I do this?
That'll do. No.
No. There it goes.
There's a way of making it go on the right side instead of. Okay, that'll do. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't do anything. This is basically demo delays in National Registry are good to have, but they don't create long-term preservation to preserve Ashland's history. And these, if you can see, are some of the major buildings that we would hope to preserve. On the top there, you have the public library, and you have the Masons building. On the right is John Stone's, which has been here before the town was created. Below that, the fire station, which is built in 1923, is part of the historic fabric of Ashland. And below that is the 1886 railroad station that is privately owned now. We have the church, which has been here since, I believe, is it 1835? Close enough. And to the left of that, I forget that's the Higgins block, I believe, which is now, it used to have Dave's TV when I first moved to Ashland, but it's the blue building next to Sunnyside. And above it is the mill buildings, which, as we know, is a whole different discussion on what's happening with them. They're included because part of, if you look at the map that's provided, look down to the map. The map, it has to be a contiguous district. If you wanted to do individual buildings, you'd have to have an individual local historic commission for each and every building. That's never gonna, we'd never have enough participants in Ashland to do that. They don't really recommend it unless Some places do it. I think the only place I can think of is the city of Somerville. Tends to do it in single buildings, but it's a different process with a city as opposed to a town.
Yeah, and they also have staff people.
And they have
They
staff
have
people.
planning and development people who monitor that
Yeah.
stuff. So that's a much larger undertaking.
Yeah. So if you can see from the map, it starts over at the Ashland Historical Society, the Ocean House, continues down Main Street to past the mill buildings, the building next to the church, and around the cemetery, which we've been restoring in another matter, and going down Front Street, all the buildings on that side of the street until the library, and from the library across the street, all the buildings across Homer Ave, starting at the train station, the block right on the corner where the dentist is used to be Eber's Pharmacy, and where Pizza Mine is right now, and the post office, and going back up Main Street on that side, John Stone's, and then we get where Lunkers is, the old general store, Town Hall, the James Jackson House, and up to the corner spot. Like I said, not everything in those in this district is historical, and there's different things apply to that. The non-historic buildings don't fall under the purview for as far as fixing them or altering the exterior, unless you wanted to knock it down and put up a five-story apartment block. Is that correct, Stacy, basically? I mean,
It would all be reviewable, but certainly it would be reviewed just like it would anything else in the local historic district. But if it's a more modern building, there's not as much, you're not worrying as much about, the historic slate roof or something like that. So it is reviewable, but it's, it'll be the local historic district commission's,
Right.
decision whether or not, they can also say, go right ahead. So it's within the purview of the local commission decide if they just want let the project go through as is. So
right, and what we've basically asked ourselves, like, what is a local historic district? A local historic district's a contiguous group, like I said, of historic structures that the town votes to preserve, and it requires approval from the Mass Historic Commission, which we already have. This was all submitted to them in the fall, and they've approved it, and it's going to need a 2/3 vote at the town meeting in the spring. So, an Ashland Historic Center District Commission will be then, if this passes, what will happen is there will be a separate district commission set up, separate from the Historical Commission, that will have members, much like the study committee was, some people from the architectural field, real estate, somebody who actually owns a building or lives in the actual district, and it's exclusively made up of, we'd say it would be residents, but there's only one resident that I know of that's actually in it. But it'll be a separate entity, and that's who will be doing the reviews and stuff like that. Exclusively in the downtown area from the post office and back, right? Okay. What does a historic district do? Preserves the exterior of historically and architecturally significant buildings, protects the character of the downtown, it increases property values. Study after study indicates that the value of properties in LHD have significantly benefited. One we quote here is from downtown, it says downtown revitalization. Main Street's an economic revitalization program based on utilizing each downtown's historic buildings. There is no more cost-effective program of the economic development of any kind in the U.S. today. And since 1980, Main Street districts in more than 2,000 communities across the country have seen a collective investment of $79 billion, 285,000 buildings rehabilitated, and more than 640,000 net jobs and nearly 144,000 new businesses. That's from 24 Reasons Historic Preservation is Good for Your Community. What does it not do? It does not control property usage. We have no control over what business, what type of business. All the district is concerned about is the exterior of the buildings and what you can see from the street. It doesn't control what businesses are allowed. It does not prevent new construction. I know if somebody like the bank, or like the Needham Bank, or the Santander, one of them decide to close the building, that's not going to be prevented, or it's not going to be prevented. New construction there will be allowed, of course. And what you'd have to submit, whoever develops it would have to submit part of the plan to the local historic district for approval of the design, along with the planning board, and all the other regular government posts that you would do it to. Studies have shown it does not decrease property values. It only applies to the portions of the building that can be seen from the street. So let's say I had something on Facebook, Michael Herbert asked if, give an example, if Lunkers, for example, wanted to expand out back where you can't see it from the street, fine, go for it. It's not reviewable. They can do that. If you wanted to change the facade or the structure of the building, then it would be reviewable. Not saying it wouldn't pass, but it would be reviewable. Existing structures are right now grandfathered until significant alterations are requested. There was another thing I saw online that someone said that this was a grandfather, we're going to make everybody change their buildings around to make some kind of establishment of downtown Concord and Ashland or something like that. That's not true. No, everything that's here right now is grandfathered in, so you don't have to worry about doing anything to your properties right now, if that's a concern. Where was I? And the creation of the district commission, the local historic commission will feature one member each of they'll be appointed by the select board, one member each from the Ashland Historical Society. Like I said, the chapter of the American Institute of Architects covering Ashland, Board of Realtors covering Ashland, one property owner from the district, and they can also appoint other people, up to 4 alternative members at their discretion. The district commission is responsible for overseeing the district's bylaw, and it's also responsible for establishing a non-binding set of guidelines. The local study committee worked on the guidelines. They're all, this is all, the bylaws and the guidelines. The guidelines are non-binding. They're suggestions. For example, if someone came in, what do I got to do to comply with this historic district bylaw? Those are suggestions, some things that they could consider, and some things that the commission would be, considering too. Those are non-binding. They're up on the town's website. Our study committee put them together, and it's basically cobbled together from other towns. Well, we're using things that other towns have already successfully incorporated into their local historic district commissions. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just trying to do some preservation work for downtown Ashland before it's all gone. And that's basically our intent and our mission. The bylaws have been vetted by the town council, by the Mass State Historical Commission, and eventually, if this passes at town meeting, it'll be going to the Attorney General's office, who has the final say, and then it'll become registered at the Registry of Deeds, and then it becomes in effect. The map, the whole report will go in as a bylaw document. And that. In summary, we're trying to do is the historic district creates a thoughtful community-based review process that protects historically significant buildings from demolition and inappropriate alteration. It will create a local historic district commission of local residents to determine how best to protect the unique character of Ashland's downtown by providing a review process for changes to exterior architectural features visible from the public way, while allowing thoughtful consideration of change. Okay? So, with that, I would like to ask if anybody is looking to speak in favor of the district, please let themselves be known, and you can go up to the podium and identify yourself. Go ahead.
Okay, Even, Dr. Sony, 119 Main Street. Yes, I've been well informed by the committee of every meeting I attended to. And it is a good idea to make this town more visible by having this to go on with. I just wanted to make sure that is if anybody wanted to tear down a building, is there still the 90-day time period in case they want to tear down a building?
What do you mean the 90-day time?
90-day time, yes.
You mean the demolition delay?
Yes.
That's a year.
It's a year?
Yep.
Okay,
Or up to a year. And
up to a year.
Yeah, and anything that's in the district would still be subject to the demolition delay bylaw, which if it fit the criteria, if it was over, I think it would.
Add to that, actually, what, the way the hierarchy works is that the Historic District Commission will have say on the matter. Actually, it'll supersede the demo delay.
Yeah,
So there won't be the same clock on it like you would have had with the demo delay. So what you'd end up doing is you'd end up bringing your proposal, you're seeking a certificate of appropriateness from the local Historic District Commission to demo the building and what you're, proposing in its place. So it actually will, it's a separate, you'll go through Historic District, and then you won't have to go through demo delay.
okay.
It supersedes.
I stand corrected.
Okay, let's see if I can formulate this question coming out right. The exteriors, the front of each building, every time there is a building, does it need to say on a sign, a circa sign on every circa sign on the front of them to say that they are historical?
no.
No,
No. Does this have to have the exterior look?
well, like I said, it's anything that's already in downtown Ashland is grandfathered into looking the way it looks right now. So this would only affect changes. If someone wanted to change the facades or the exterior, that's when a review process would go into effect.
So changes subsequent to the implementation
Right.
of the bylaw.
And last one, this is a 2/3 vote town meeting.
Mhm.
I don't think they do, but would the zoning of this town have anything to say about it?
Zoning?
We're not changing usage or anything like that for zoning.
Well, usually it's, if it's a bylaw, zoning might be involved, but something like this is separate from a zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, Julie Nardone, 86 Elliott Street. I see this not as a restriction, but as an opportunity. Local historic districts, they really do a lot for the local economy because it is a destination. And I think towns that don't use their history to enhance their local economy are really missing out. And I'm going to use Hudson as an example because I was just there. And they have 65 buildings in their historic district. And the history has really brought that town alive. It was 15 years ago, most of the buildings were vacant. And now it's just booming. It's incredible. I've heard of someone in Natick moving to Hudson. And if we're going to spend, I think we're up to about 17 million on the downtown redo, I mean, what exactly are we redoing and bringing back to life if the history can be just eliminated? So anyways, I think it's a good thing. We have, our zoning is very watered down compared to some other towns. So I think the developers in this town have been able to do pretty much what they've wanted to do. And we always seem to be watering it down. This is something that could be done for the town, for the people, for the community, something we could be proud of. I know when I go to other towns and I see the entering the local historic district with the name, I find that's something to be proud of. When I travel to different cities, I always go to the historic downtown, like visitor center. I want to learn about it. And I just think it would increase the pride and the prestige of the downtown if we went and did this. And it's not unusual. Many towns are doing this. All the towns around us, I looked. And I think it would be great for small business. And we really, our downtown kind of doesn't have a much of an identity, but this would help pull it together. We don't really have a brand. So anyways, I think it's a great thing, and that it would be a means to pull this whole thing together, whatever it is we're doing in the downtown. It will pull it together and give it a focal point. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Which just reminds me, when you do come into town, there are two signs, one on either end, saying, "Welcome to the Ashland Historic District," which isn't really official. Those signs were just put up, I believe, by Mr. Cuddy back in the day, more of an advertising thing, but they don't signify anything. They're just signs. We don't have a local historic district, so.
Hi, it's Debbie Brogan. I'm at 119 Main Street. I live in the James Jackson House. Lived here all my life. Met my husband at the high school. It's just a really sad thing for those of us who have lived here all our lives to see what's going on in downtown, and I don't think it's going to stop. I think unless we do something like this, we're going to lose the character, the history, all of that from our downtown area, which is a sad thing. I would have hoped the town had handled things differently in downtown. And the same thing when I see that entering historic downtown Ashland, now I kind of have to, it's ridiculous because it's beginning to be that we're going to lose it. So I just want to say that, thank you guys so much for doing this. And any way a regular citizen could help, I am willing to help. Thanks.
Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to say anything? Just unmute yourself and unmute your camera and just come on down.
Probably have them raise hand.
Yeah.
So we get them in order if they're
Go
on.
ahead. Nadine, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you all for putting your time and effort into this. I think it's a great idea.
And Nadine, you are a property owner and a resident.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, we would ask everyone to identify themselves and give their address as the in-person speakers have done.
Oh, 75 Main Street.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Well, now I'll ask for anybody to speak in opposition to this.
My name is,
Hi, Mike.
Jim, is he
Can't hear you.
speaking? I'm
Did you
not
hit the
hearing
button?
him.
that's it? Sorry.
Try again.
I'll start over. I'm Mike Kane. I own 126 South Storage and MG Kane Properties at 162 Pond Street here in town. And I think the intent is great to keep downtown Ashland, nice and traditional and historic. I just question the need for a bylaw that gives 5 unelected people in town the power to dictate what these property. I don't own property downtown. What they can and can't do with their property, and I think it's kind of unnecessary. And with your dissertation, you were kind of making my argument of why I think it's unnecessary. I was born here in 1951, so I've been here a long time, and I've seen changes, most for the better. But you went through the various properties in downtown Ashland, and I just wanted to run through quickly some of the changes that have been made in the last 20, 25 years in downtown. 37 Main Street, that's the dental office, was a house converted to the dental office, very traditional looking property. 98 100 Main Street, the brick two-family across from Town Hall, had all new roof, windows, entry, paint, landscape. Looks better than it has probably in the last 75 years. 101 Main Street, of course, our Town Hall, was going to be torn down. Some people, activists, got active, saved it. She was here in town. She was one of the leaders of it. 137 Main Street, that's a fire station. It's being rehabilitated to a brewery. It's just getting paint, new patio, no structural changes. 179 Main, Stone's Public House. Had a lot of exterior work done, roof, dormers, balconies, paint, landscape. Looks better than it has in the last 73 years that I've been around. 5 Homer Ave, that's the Zen Dental, was Eber's Pharmacy, which opened in 1940. The building is exactly the same way it was, with the exception of signage, what have you. Railroad Station, 20, 25 years ago, put the sidewalk in front of it, the curbing, to stop the trucks from hitting the roof. They repaired the slate roof and painted the trim. Looks exactly like it did probably in the 1800s. Few properties outside the current historic district. 116 Front Street, it's a 3-family currently being rehabbed by Brian Shiva, owner of Ashland Lumber, very traditional construction. Of course, 134 Front Street, Ashland Lumber, new construction, very traditional. All these properties have been cleaned up without any bylaw, just the cooperation of the owners. It was some input from the design review committee, probably on the Ashland Lumber and some of the newer 3-story apartments that have been built in town. So rather than have a bylaw where you dictate to people what they can and can't do, people that are paying taxes on their private property, why don't you incentivize it? Ashland has several business incentive programs currently. So they have a sign and facade program, matches 50% up to $5,000 the cost for exterior improvements on the facades and the signage of buildings. I believe it's run through Beth Reynolds' office. And they have a grant program for new businesses that up to $10,000 for first year's rent and up to $10,000 for equipment acquisition costs. So what if you developed what I'm going to call a historic property improvements program, a similar fashion, where you put in CPA money, which can be used for historic preservation, into a fund. So that when someone comes down to Town Hall to get a building permit, they want to put vinyl siding on, which I don't think you want. So that's going to cost them $15,000 to $20,000. You want wood siding, that's going to cost $35,000, $40,000. You say, hey, we'll kick in $15,000 to $20,000 to get this done the way we'd like to see it. In other words, you use the carrot and not the stick to make things happen that you want to see. I just have a real problem with people's property rights and dictating to them what they can and can't do. And it only takes 3 out of the 5 members to make the ruling. So, I mean, that's 3 out of like a town of, what, 19,000 or so people. I just doesn't feel right to me. And, as somebody who's seen the changes for, I guess, 1958, that's when the first grade bus was going through town to go to what's now known as the Mendez School. It's only gotten better, especially with the street improvements and the poles coming down. Don't think we need it. I wish you'd think of other alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I have has anybody been to downtown Walpole recently? When you come under 27 and you see the huge apartment buildings right there, which I grew up in downtown Walpole. I used to walk under that railroad bridge on my way home to school. That's what happens when there's no restrictions on the downtown area. It's way out of proportion to the downtown building. We have one of those in Ashland. I'm kind of getting used to it, but on the corner where the Alberini house was, that became the condo or whatever they are, apartments right now next to the church, that's wildly out of place in downtown Ashland, and that's just my personal opinion. But I mean, it's all well and good. Everybody has good intentions. I love it, and I love the fact that people want to make it kind of like look like it fits in the neighborhood and stuff like that. But not everybody's going to come in here with that kind of mindset, you know. And this is not just for now and what we have now and people doing it now. This is for the future too. And the reason why we settled on what seems like it's draconian is really the absolute only way to do this in this state. There's no other mechanism to do this. So that's why we came up with this. It's taken a lot of research, and it'll be easier just to go on a case-by-case basis, but there's no way to do that because the town's not going to let you have 25 different historical commissions for 25 different buildings. It's just we don't have the manpower or the volunteer level for that. So I agree with Mr. Kane's assessment, and you know, I'd like to keep it the way it is too, but there is going to be change. It's inevitable. But how you regulate that change and manage it is what we're trying to just put a little bit of a break on, and a little bit of guidance from the people of this town, not to tell people what to do. I mean, we have to. You have to, when you're building something in town. I'm not a builder. I know some people in this room are, but I know you have to go through all kinds of hoops and hurdles to get something built in any town or any city. I mean, there's planning boards, there's zoning, there's this, that, and everything else. Okay, this is another layer, but it's for a very small portion of town for a very specific reason. That's all we're trying to accomplish. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I like the idea of incentivizing, and I don't see that these two approaches are mutually exclusive. They could both be undertaken, carrot and stick.
I'm just checking now. There may be, actually, I was going to say the same thing. There's the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which is just a pro-preservation group. They have a group, and it's been around for 30, 40 years. And it's a Main Streets program, and it's another way. It's very downtown-oriented, and they have grants. They often have a downtown manager, you know, and they help guide people through that sort of thing. And I would like to check, I'm going to check for Mike too, about CPA funds for preservation, whether or not it can go to individuals. So I'm going to check that for you too. But yeah, incentivizing is a great idea. I don't know if it's private property.
Yes, sir.
My name is John Ellsworth. I'm at 22 High Street Extension. My family and I came here 50 years ago, and I would remind everybody on that table and everybody who's in this room that downtown Ashland was a desert. It literally was a defunct railroad siding with steel sticking out of the ground for rails that didn't work, and it was ugly. John Stone's Inn was a biker bar with people urinating off the porch onto Main Street. And I could go on and on and on. Without the artifice, and that's what I consider what you guys are coming up with, of an historical commission, okay, downtown got improved. It looks great, okay? And I just want you to understand that the people who are basically living there and running businesses there are well-intended. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some stuff that happened to us in my business downtown that really irritated me. About 20 years ago, we gutted 91 Main Street and we created a real estate office. We put in another toilet. We had to meet code for cast iron for a one-story building. It was ridiculous. Just all kinds of ridiculous things to build the internal part of that space. You talk about if it can't be seen from the window or it can't be seen from the front, nobody has any control over it. And yet the selectmen, about a year later, after I'd done all of that, commissioned a group of 3 people to walk around downtown and gauge what they were looking at. And they came into our office and they said, John, Your office is ugly from the window. The problem is that as I read the bylaw that you guys have put together, it can be expanded and extended not only to the exterior look, but to what it looks like through the windows, okay? You shake your head. Read the
You're
damn
wrong.
thing, okay?
It's not true.
It's totally open-ended. It
No,
is-
it's not.
No, please.
I disagree.
Well, I'm not here to debate you, okay?
know.
I'm telling you what my interpretation of the bylaw is.
Okay.
You can control color, you can control, I understand you don't like plastic, okay? When my wife and I added a very large garage, we lived in an old house. You can't get trim made out of wood any longer to match what was built 200 years ago. So we went to plastic, and we went to a company in Connecticut, and we had the plastic replicated in the same trim form that we used in our new garage. And yet I see that plastic is anathema to the bylaws. And there's all kinds of requirements. Hey, maybe I'm misreading it. I've got to read the whole thing in great detail. But so I just heard vinyl. You guys don't like vinyl. Good God, all the houses being built today go with vinyl. So I'm going to stop talking about the specifics because that's going to happen in April. All right, I'll have had a chance to read the darn thing. Okay, I just saw it for the first time in a great deal detail tonight. Now let's talk a little bit about the granite buildings. The only reason we're here is because of the granite buildings, the Lombard buildings. That's the only reason we're here, because the Historic Commission was basically not happy with what happened. I will make not an accusation, but I'll make a judgment, all right? If the town, in its infinite wisdom, had worked with the developer and considered maybe assisting rather than fighting, we could have saved all three of those granite fronts. It only takes money. I see you look doubtful, okay? It only takes money. If we can spend $5 million on a house that's been totally wrecked on the inside, is no longer historic, in order to save the barn behind it, and I would add to prevent, how many condos and apartments did we prevent? That was the ultimate objective, not historical. It was to prevent something. $5 to $6 million in the Valentine property is crazy, but we did it. We're not a poor town. $500,000, maybe buying the granite fronts and working with the builder instead of telling the builder to get bent, okay, go away. We don't want your housing. It might have happened. He might have done it. The problem is that this thing is a hammer. It's a sledgehammer. And a little bit that I have read of it tells me it's a sledgehammer. Now, I know you look skeptical, Mr. Nielsen, okay?
Well, Mr. Ellsworth,
But the
you just said
problem
the
is,
little bit that
let
I've
me
read of it.
finish, okay? Is that every time
You're
I've had a
calling
chat
me-
with you on the Zoom committee, you try to talk over people. Just listen. This is a public hearing. Listen, okay?
I'm listening.
There are alternative ways of making this happen. You've chosen the most draconian.
Thank you. I would just like to say for the record that I was not trying to talk over anybody, but I was addressed directly there, and I was answering him. However, I wish you would take the time to read the whole thing before casting aspersions. Thank you. Go ahead, Debbie.
I'd just like to say to Mr. Ellsworth,
Excuse me, it's been available on the town website for over a month now. It's not, it's on the town website, I'm sorry. You could call the town hall and find somebody to help you with it if you couldn't find it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
just like to say to Mr. Ellsworth, I think what he's trying to maybe say is that he doesn't like the fact that he thinks that the buildings, it's going to be difficult for people who run businesses or whatever. And as far as the mill buildings go, here's what we wanted. We wanted our mill buildings that this town was built around saved. Saved. Okay? And that is why there was so many problems and so many people raising their voices. Because if you had lived here all your life and seen those mill buildings, you didn't want a facade, you didn't want to just see a granite front. There are businesses over there, many, many, many businesses over there who are going to have to get out. We don't want a facade. We want the mill buildings and the businesses that are there to stay there, because many of us, my dentist I've been going to for over 40 years in that building. There are many, many people who have businesses that are just going to lose. You think they're going to stay in Ashland? Where are they going to stay in Ashland? We wanted our mill buildings, and we wanted those businesses to stay. That's why we fought it. That's why we were against it. That's why we're still against it. But it doesn't matter.
One other thing, too, I'd just like to let the audience know that the Ashland Historical Commission did have many meetings with the owners of the mill buildings in the initial stages of their planning. And the original plan was to save the first two buildings completely, and the third building was up for discussion. We didn't have anything to say about the brick building on the right where the gym is and all that stuff. That was never part of the discussion. As far as other boards in the town, which happened after that, we had nothing to do with it. We were fine with what was going on, as if he would save as much as he could, whatever was going to be financial viable for him. And Joanna and I were both there at the time. This is before some of these members were on the board. We talked with the owner. I've toured that property probably 3 times now, and there's been 3 different plans. And the last one, he came in with the 40B stuff, and that takes it off the table for a lot of the local initiative to have any say in the project. But we were working with the developer, the owner, beforehand. We weren't putting up roadblocks. We wanted to save as much of those granite buildings as we could. I mean, Joanna, if you can second this. Turn it.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
So one comment I do want to make in terms of one of the aspersions made earlier, the Historical Commission was not reformed because of the mill buildings. The call for people to reform the commission came well in advance of that. It just happened to take the town nearly a year to go through the talent bank and interview people who had an interest in preserving that which is Ashland. Myself, I'm an 18-year resident of town, having moved and lived in many historical communities, and I've seen the destruction of downtowns, coastal communities, where big wealth comes in, buys up large swaths of lands, and erect 1,000 condo units, completely obscuring a view. And that's the memory I have as a young person living in Massachusetts. I didn't want to see that coming into Ashland in my midlife. So that was my motivating factor of I want to preserve some small town Massachusetts feel. So that's where I feel at home. And many other people may feel differently. But back to Jim's original question, though, yes, that several of us had on multiple occasions met with the current owners of the mill buildings, and he had presented his various ideas to us. Not that we have any skin in the game. We don't have any teeth in the game. We can't say yes, we can't say no. It was a courtesy that to involve us in what we were thinking, what kind of pulse beat we thought that people of Ashland could accept in terms of changes to those structures. Obviously, people who know the history behind those structures are such that, okay, we don't want them changed. We don't want them gone. And the woman who had spoken just a few minutes ago, yes, we feel for everyone who works in those buildings and every person who patronizes the businesses in those buildings. We share those concerns. We're not anti-business. We're actually very pro-business, but we're also pro-preservation in the same context. And that's really, that's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna.
I'd like to address one of the concerns that Mr. Kane raised concerning the authority of a small group of 5 to make decisions, and just observe that this is also the case with pretty much all of the boards in the town. The Select Board has 5, the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission. This is typical of town governments, so it's nothing unusual to have a board of that many people. That it's an odd number is essential so that you can get a majority.
Okay, Adam.
Thank you, Jim. Adam Sachs, live at 2 Esther Lane. I do serve as the president of the Ashland Business Association, but I'm here with my own voice. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and get some clarity on a few things. I would like some clarity just on what is the structure of this, right? Just in terms of the time that each person has speaking. My understanding was that there were 4s speaking first, and then there were nays.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you can speak as long as you want.
Okay, all right.
There's no
I don't want
time.
to speak for a long time. but
No,
I
there's no time limit. I mean, we can speak, we have the room till 10. So if
Okay.
you want to go to 10.
All right. Yeah, I've been here in Ashland for 23 years. Lived at Pine Lake Townhomes initially, and then we moved to Esther Lane. I grew up in Worcester and grew up in a family business that my grandfather started 75 years ago. Ultimately, it was sold last year, but it was a window business. And it was at 836 Main Street in downtown Worcester. Downtown Worcester was a little tough. They ultimately moved it right next to Coney Island. And I've had the opportunity to sit on some of your subcommittees and get a little bit more clarity in the sort of the details of the guidelines and so forth. And ultimately, that building that my father moved his business to became a historical district. And he wanted, the windows were sort of breaking down, and he wanted to replace the windows within the building with his own windows. And he was denied. And he was required to put windows in there that would have cost 4 or 5 times what a normal window would have cost to meet the same aesthetics. So ultimately, I'd just like to get some clarity on what would that look like? When you talk about the exterior, that would include windows, would it not? So can you just provide a little bit more clarity about that? And ultimately, my father's business, he moved he moved to a different location in Worcester. So that Worcester lost a business, in Worcester, the 75 years, based upon sort of the historic district that was imposed in my family business. So I'd just like to get some clarity.
And I'll just say, obviously, each district is going to be different, city by city, town by town. I know that if you lived on Beacon Hill in Boston, you have a different set of rules than if you lived in the South End, or if every commission's it's gonna change. We're Ashland, so we're not going to be. I don't think, but I mean, it depends on who serves on the commission, obviously. But Stacy, go ahead with the. If you can give us some clarity on that.
I can't speak to, I don't know, I'm not familiar with Worcester's historic preservation bylaw. But I do, yes, windows are reviewable. But I do want to add also, there is a hardship clause in here that you can make a case that if that's just prohibitive, because, it all depends on the collective. For example, in downtown Dedham, the cute little area right downtown, if you replace windows, they want you to do true leaded divided lights. And that's very expensive these days. And that's a whole other issue. And luckily, I'm not on there. But for example, I was chair of the Hopkinton Historic District for several years. And I served on it before I was chair. And we allowed vinyl that looks it's got molding on it, and it was just applied on the front. And because everybody wanted to be reasonable about it. So it's a matter of being reasonable about it. But that depends who you get on there. And I will add, actually, I want to add one other thing. The bylaw is set up by the state and vetted by the state. It has slots that are set up for architects or realtors. However, if you can't find anyone after, I think it's after, the way it's set up is that you make a request of the Boston Society of Architects, the AIA, if someone wants, would someone like to come and sit on our Ashland board, and nobody answers, the select board has the right after that. Same thing with a realtor. If you don't have a realtor who applies, the select board can then take from a pool of applicants from the general public. So there are at-large seats as well. So it's not just property owners in the district. So you can get a wider representation.
Right.
So, but yes, absolutely. And I think there was also a question about plastic. We in Hopkinton, especially on, some of you are familiar with the little blue house that's right near the library that burned down during COVID. They reconstructed that. That was the owner's decision to reconstruct it. And that's all plastic.
Yeah.
Don't look too closely, but it was to be reasonable. Part of this is placemaking. It's like, I think Julie Nardone was talking about, like Hudson's transformation is amazing. So that's part of it. You're trying to keep the feel of it, but it depends how reasonable.
So if the commission came back with something that was potentially onerous or too expensive for the owner to be able to absorb, could there be something like Mike suggested, and some sort of incentive opportunity where the town could absorb some of that cost if.
That would be a decision, that there's no mechanism for it in here, and I did double check the CPA, and that does, it can go to, CPA, historic preservation money can go to private citizens, like private projects, but it still has to be reviewed. They have to, the Community Preservation Commission would need to review the project to ensure that the design changes meet the Secretary of Interior standards. So you're back around the same thing as well.
Yeah.
So
it's just, for me, I support making sure that we have, a feel, but I am concerned about cost. And ultimately, windows are expensive, and ultimately you might have the opposite effect where you have a business owner say, I'm going to put my hands up, I'm going to leave. And then you have an abandoned building. So that's not what you want.
That's not helping.
That's not what anybody wants, right?
So that's my argument. And
So it's in the town's best interest to go along to,
Certainly.
try to keep the businesses happy. I mean, that's why we're so upset about the mill buildings, because that's all a bunch of businesses that are just going to be displaced. But at the same time, there is an appeal process, and if hardship is shown, and, common sense, I would think, would prevail, I would hope. But then again, it doesn't, there's no way to answer, every question in the future, what's going to happen. It's the intent is not to drive people into bankruptcy to repair their windows. That's what I have.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Do we have anybody else would like to comment?
Good evening.
Good evening.
William Goldberg, property owner, business owner, Main Street Wine and Spirits, right downtown. Couple of questions. Earlier, I think you had said that non-historical buildings might be exempt, might not be the word, but, and then I think you asked Stacy, and you gave an answer, but it wasn't a very clear answer, so I would like a little clarity there.
Actually, everything needs to have certificate of appropriateness. So you would come in and say, this is what I'm looking to do, I need a certificate of appropriateness.
Jim, we can't hear her online.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I was trying to be good and keep my mic off in between. Yes, it would have to be, you'd have to just, the way we do it in Hopkinton is it's just a form you fill out online and just say, this is what I want to do, upload a photo if you've got one from like your window guy or whatever. And then the local historic district commission can decide that it's so minor that it doesn't need a public hearing, doesn't need a meeting, and they just stamp it and it goes on its way. Or if they want to see more, you could come to a meeting and they talk about it. But yeah, it would be, everything would be reviewable once it's in the district. It's all reviewable, even though it's non-historic. But yeah, it may be that it's so small. And certainly in this bylaw, it includes things that are not reviewable. I mean, you've got a flat roof, but if you had if you were changing out the vinyl the asphalt shingles in kind, that's not a big deal. If you want to paint it, that isn't not reviewable. There's a bunch of things that aren't reviewable, so it may fall. It depends how extensive your alterations are.
But these historical buildings
Yeah,
are
they
still
get
controlled.
Yes, they're all part,
by the
it's
LHD.
all one together, yeah.
Bylaws, I think, Ms. Nielsen, you said they were non-binding.
No, not the bylaws, the guidelines,
The guidelines are
The guidelines.
non-binding.
yes.
But can submitted plans still be denied? So if I submitted plans to make a change, you know, the
Yeah.
guidelines are non-binding, but can you still use those guidelines to deny what I'm trying to do if I were doing something?
Yeah, the guidelines are things like, if you had like a mansard roof, we'd like you to replace it with another mansard roof, or something like that. Following, the short answer is yes, because in the actual bylaws, everything's reviewable. So,
So they
if
can
it's
be
within
denied.
anything that's, an exterior feature, so it's on the exterior of the building,
Okay.
is reviewable. And it may be that the commission decides it's not a big deal, and.
And
it
maybe they do.
Yeah, it depends on who you end up with.
Another question, the hardship appeal, is that a lengthy process? Are there a lot of obstacles in the way?
I haven't,
Is it a costly
I
process?
think that's a good question. I've only ever dealt with small things like accessibility ramps and things like that, and those were an easy, yes, please do put an accessibility ramp on your house, you know, so that was, but yeah, I guess it depends on the size of the project. I think that would depend on.
That's a good question that we're gonna have to look
Yeah,
into.
I think that's a good,
Yeah,
The process.
the process of
Yeah.
appealing,
costs.
yeah, because that's not in the
Perhaps.
bylaw, but that is something
that would be
that's-
something to
it's a
work on.
byproduct. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's not in the standard bylaw from the state.
yeah, and
But
I'd have to check with the state
let me double check if there's
on
anything in
that
there.
to basically see what they say about that, because that's a good question.
Yeah.
We didn't, you know.
Would make a hardship appeal
Well, yeah.
difficult if it was a
And I,
lengthy
you know,
and
me
costly.
personally, I'd like the hardship appeal to be easy, you
Yeah.
know, and that, but I can't answer without knowing the legal thing from the state, which I don't have at the top of my head right now.
And just one last thing. A lot of what I've heard tonight is based on sentimentality and feelings. And we're a nation of moving forward.
Mhm.
And I would just leave it with that. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you.
My name is Margot Ellsworth. I live at 22 High Street Extension here in town. Have been here over 50 years. What I'm hearing throughout this whole, everybody's conversation here is that we have many tiers and processes through which we add to our properties. There's control over what we can do and what we can't do. And we've all accepted that. But the fact of the matter is, this program that we're discussing tonight is all about, well, they may let you, or you might be able to, or you'd have to apply for. It is just more control over our own personal property that we pay taxes on, that we have mortgages for, and more control over my property I don't like. I don't want. I would never do anything that's absurd. And you say, yeah, well, we can't be sure. Well, the fact of the matter is we can't be sure what this board would do either in controlling what we want to do with our older, quote, historic buildings. So I am fully against a historic society. I've looked at it in the past on a state level, and it's called control. So I am not for it.
Thank you.
My name is Bill Wallace, 136 Pond Street, here in town. I was really just looking for a point of clarification. I'm just beginning to get my feet wet in this whole process. But part of your PowerPoint earlier on in the meeting said that, and I may have missed the complete point, but it was brought up that something can be turned down or approved by a two-thirds vote of the
Town meeting.
town meeting. Yes,
It's the
thank
town
you very
meeting.
much.
This has
Yeah.
to be approved by 2/3 of the voters at the town meeting.
Okay, and could you just clarify for me what it was that could be either rejected or approved at the town meeting?
It's the bylaw.
Okay, and it's the bylaws that are on the town website, right?
Yes. There's a print, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, that was basically wanted to get cleared up, so thank you for that. The other thing that has been in my mind, if you go through Hopkinton and Holliston, the approaches to that center, those centers of town, I think speak volumes for the appearance of those two communities. I'm talking about the magnificent Victorian homes. And if you go into Natick, same thing. There is a cohesiveness there that is presented. And I just have a question in my own mind about looking at Ashland, which has a different history. And to my mind, quite frankly, and I'm just speaking for myself, the center of Ashland doesn't have any history that you can see by you can walk through it and look at the individual buildings such as you have in the brochure. But I don't see how coming up with a commission that can dictate signage, materials for building and altering buildings, the fronts of buildings, and I don't even know about the interiors. I just don't, I think what we have now is very good. And we've been here in this town since 1975. So I just don't think that this commission is really a desirable thing. And again, that's just my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, can I speak?
Helen?
Yeah.
Before you speak, Helen, though, we'll get to the commission members. Does anybody else have anything to say, either for or against? And I want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak that made it out tonight. Mark, you've already gone once, right?
Yeah, that's why I looked around.
Oh.
I'm on Zoom. Can I say something?
Sure, go ahead. One second.
Hi, my name is Di. I am on Cargolani in Ashland, so right behind the mill building. I heard the 40B town hall, and it seemed like they were keeping the granite buildings. Is that accurate?
Partially. They're keeping the first building, and the latest plan that I've heard is they're keeping part of the second building, about a quarter of the way, or maybe a third of the way in from the street. The rest of it's all going.
Oh.
The third building completely going, and the second part of the second building is going. At least that's the last, I mean, it could change. I don't know, but that's the last plan we were told about.
Yeah, so that's good to know. It sounds like it wasn't the case here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's it?
Well, I mean, this committee would have nothing to do. I mean, it feels like the town is already kind of in process of
Yeah,
uncontrollable.
the mill buildings are kind of out of the discussion right now because it's been taken as a 40B project, which
Right.
supersedes a
But they
lot of the
are
power the
keeping
town has to
They are
negotiate.
keeping a good amount of the building, and they're
Yeah.
keeping smokestack. I was happy to hear that.
Yeah, the original plan, like I said before, was all of the first two buildings, and the third one was up for debate. But he was going to reuse the granite from the third building if he did take it down. But I don't know where he stands on that, to tell you the truth,
Oh.
right now.
All right. From what I understand, it was the first two coming from Myrtle Street. They
Yeah.
were keep, yeah.
Yep.
So, okay. That's all. Thank you.
Anybody else on Zoom? No? Okay. Quickly, Mr. DeSoni.
Okay, again, Mark Tsui. See how quickly this is. I'm gonna frame my questions out of the brochure.
Okay.
I'm looking on page 3 of this. It says, how is local historic districts different from national registry, places, historic districts, and designation? I'll break it down to a short sentence, to the very last paragraph. The local district, on the other hand, is established with 2/3 majority. What's the local district historical places for this town?
What are they? What are the local historical places?
Yep. That Ashland is noted for.
Yeah,
And the dam over at the reservoir.
yeah, and that's
Is
it.
it? The dam, I don't know how that happened, but the dam at the reservoir is on the National Register. Watershed, something, I don't
said
know.
Ashland.
Thematic
Yeah,
It
but
says in here Ashland Dam and Spillway.
that's it, yeah.
Is any burial grounds in this?
Yes, the cemetery behind the Federated Church, which we're calling, what are we calling now, Helen?
The Village Burial Ground. It's
Village-
actually the original name.
The Village Burial Ground, which is a whole different discussion, which has been under different, it's a different subset of the Historical Commission. We've been restoring that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And under the proposed bylaw that's in the brochure, on page 21, 8.1 on the top, make it 8.2, excuse me. Is this in the case of the construction or addition of existing buildings and commissions, the appropriateness of the scale, shape, structure, its land area, building, and structure, is all that zoned and talk?
That's definitely legal land use talk.
It's boilerplate.
But yeah, a building is, for example, the Ashland Dam is in land use and preservation law. A structure is, say, the dam and the spillway, whereas a building is town hall. So it's whether or not humans inhabit it. I guess that's the.
And if humans don't inhabit, it'd be inhabiting caves. Okay, and the commission may appropriate cases impose dimensional setbacks requirements. Is that true?
Actually, a good example of this in Hopkinton, when we put in, put the new library in, which is a much substantially larger building than it was. There was talk, especially as it fronted on some of the houses that are along face the common there. There was talk about pushing back the brand new rear L a little bit so that there wouldn't be a shadow on those houses. But that's what they're talking about setback wise. So it's definitely there's an interplay between zoning setbacks and then historic district setbacks. So there are two different.
Okay. So there is a little bit of zone in setbacks. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank.
it's not zoning, but it is, they do, you're gonna have to still go through zoning.
All right,
Okay, last one, very last one.
you promise.
Very promise, because it's been mentioned, people up in the boards here, they're talking about different towns. We're Ashland. Keep it with Ashland Center and focus on Ashland Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Anybody else? Last call for public discussion on and off. If some of the commission members want to have something to say. I'll just answer Bill's question about what's historic in downtown Ashland. I gave a walking tour of downtown Ashland in October, pointing out the different buildings that are, and there's quite a few of them. They're not cohesive. They don't all look the same, but there's a history to each and every one of them, including the church. I mean, you know, and so it's absolutely, so that's the bigger goal in my mind of what we're trying to do is preserve some of these historic buildings. Everything else it's a byproduct of having to do this as a historic district. And there's no way to get around the historic district of preserving these other buildings unless you do it individually. Now, there's been some, I agree that the Valentine Estate, that's not in this. We have nothing to do with that. The Historical Commission wasn't even consulted. But at one point, someone did say to me, why don't you just have the town buy these buildings and then put restrictions in them when they resell them? I said, oh, that's not going to happen. The town's not in the real estate business of buying and selling buildings. And the one that they did try to save, which was Henry Warren's house on Chestnut Street, the developer they sold it to, I don't think it was him personally, but it was his developer, changed things in Henry's house. So he basically what's the word I'm looking for? He basically changed it from being a historical building to a non-historical building. We put a sign up in front of it, so it's right on Chestnut Street by the Warren Conference Center. But that building was the town had put a deed on with a bazillion restrictions and easements and stuff like that, and they just ignored it. And they went ahead and did it anyway. So that's why we're looking at that and saying, well, they're just going to ignore it if you just say that, because once it's done, and you can't go back and refix it because it's not historical anymore. And that's why we're only concerned with the exteriors. You can do whatever you want inside, you know. And if you're not, it's not to prevent businesses. It's not to restrict things. We have restrictions on everything we do in life. There's restrictions on our property, whether we know it or not. If we don't pay our taxes, the state can come and take it. And if the state feels like doing it, they can take your house by eminent domain. You know, that's the country we live in. It's not trying to impose restrictions on people. It's to preserve some of downtown Ashland. We specifically chose downtown Ashland because we figured it would be a starting point. There's no plans to expand, but it's a starting point on focusing on the history of Ashland and downtown before it's all gone. I mean, I might not be here to see it, obviously, and nobody in this room, but 100 years down the road, maybe some of this will still be here if we create a historic district and preserve some of the buildings downtown. Not all of them, and obviously some of them are going to go into disrepair, but that's projecting, and that's you know, you have to kind of think ahead sometimes to protect for the future. And I know everybody's not going to like it, and that's part of it. But, you know, we're trying to do the best we can here. Our intention is to preserve the historic aspect of downtown Ashland while it's still here and before it's gone. So people, that's all I really have to say. Commission members, Helen, you're up. You ready to go? You've been
Yes, I
sitting
am.
there with bated breath, I know.
No, not too bad. Thank you. Helen Nicole, I am on the Ashland Historic Commission. And so I've listened to all of the opinions tonight, and I thought some of them were interesting. And I noticed there was a list of houses and, and buildings that Mr. Kane listed that had been worked on, restored, look nice now, but he didn't mention the buildings that are gone. He didn't mention the buildings that are going. So these are the things that we think about. These are the things that it's our job to think about. I also heard that our historic district is based on feelings. A fact is that historic buildings are disappearing. Once they're gone, you cannot bring them back. The mill buildings, which will be mostly gone, they're very historic. They're significantly historic. They're built with granite that was milled in Ashland. They're the workplace of Henry Warren, who has a significant historic presence in Ashland. And I heard someone say that Ashland hasn't got history, which makes me really sad because maybe we're not doing a good enough job educating the town about the history, because there is a lot of history. Jim should have some brochures there of the walking tour of the historic downtown Ashland. Those buildings were all within the district that we want to create. We don't want to create the buildings, the district based on feelings. We want to create the district based on the buildings that will no longer exist or will be seriously altered if we don't. And I would venture to say that no one looks at Salem, Massachusetts, or Marblehead, Massachusetts, or any other Nantucket places that are highly historic areas, and they don't say, oh, they just kept those places like that because of feelings. That's not it. And I understand that people worry about having other people tell them what they can do with their property. We don't want to tell you what we can do. We want to make it thoughtful. You have zoning laws. This isn't much different from that. And we just are asking for a little bit of thoughtfulness in the downtown area to keep the historic nature of that downtown Ashland. And I think that's really important. I think history is important, and I think community and a sense of place is important. It's been said that at its best, preservation engages in the past, in a conversation with the present, and a mutual concern for the future. And this was said by William Murtaugh, the first keeper of the National Register of Historic Places. And I do believe that it is important. It is important for the people who are here now to look at those buildings and know where the culture and the history of the town came from, the place that they live, who lived here before them. And it's important for the people in the future to know about these same places. And there's only one way to do that, because once these things are gone, they are forgotten. And I can tell you that the Ferdenzi house is gone. That was never mentioned. How many people remember that house anymore? There's a few. There's not many. In the future, no one will ever know about it. And that's what's going to happen in downtown Ashland. And I already know that the mill buildings are partially going. And we know that other buildings in Ashland that are leaving that aren't in that district. And I believe there's a few other that are in danger right now downtown that will be coming up in the very near future. And so we just want them to be thoughtfully looked at. You know, it's not that we want anyone to not be able to run a business. We don't want anyone to not be able to afford to repair their building. And I do agree with the incentives. In fact, I've brought that up recently at the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee public meeting that they had in December that I attended. And I really voiced a lot of opinion about incentives and historic preservation. And then there's also tax credits and things that haven't been discussed. If you run a business, it's not for people who live in a home, but if you are running a business out of a historic building and you want to restore it or do some work to that building, there are tax credits for you to do it correctly. There are incentives, and there could be additional incentives. And I really would like to see that for Ashland, because I do believe that it's important. And it's not just based on feeling, it's based on fact that the buildings and the history will disappear if we don't do something. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I just want to say that I think, Helen, you did a great job on what you said, and I can't agree more. That's even possible, you know. And just one thing I just want to call to mind. I think Curtis here will probably nod with me on this, and that is, you know, my family heritage is partly Native American. This community was all Native American before our ancestors settled it. And what remains do we have of them today? We don't, other than elements in the town forest and other minute evidence of their presence. If we don't put in a historic district, then the features in this town that were built by our ancestors will cease to exist by some future generation. And they'll be like, who were those people? Who was Henry Warren? You know, so we need to be mindful of the mark of every generation of people, not just one person or one family, but community as a whole, because that's what Ashland is a community of many cultures, many people, and we all put our mark on this community. So we owe it to our future generations to retain those marks, those remembrances. Because if those ancestors didn't exist, we wouldn't exist today. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes? Up there.
Step in a growing situation. I understand you want to handle only a section of downtown and you want to have some sort of control and preserve the history. But then I remember at a town meeting not too many years ago that a historically involved based group wanted anybody that had a house that was X number of years old or older, you had to go through that part of the town, and they tried to have, you couldn't sell your house for 4 months, 6 months, or whatever. You had to put it through this particular board that was trying to control older homes. I don't think that passed, as I recall, which is a good thing, because you get to a point where you give an inch and you take a mile. And my thoughts are that over time, this is going to expand. There are going to be restrictions on what you can do more so. Or, again, you have to get permission to sell your house because it's a 150-year-old house or whatever. And you're shaking your head no. The fact of the matter is, this is step number one, and it really bothers me.
Want to address that?
There's nothing in this bylaw about selling properties.
I would just say, too, that this is not an easy process, and I don't envy anyone who tries to do this again. I know that you have to go through many, many, many hoops and as many things and many components to this. It's not easy, and it's a change, you know. And
I
it's
will
not.
say, I can't speak to, in terms of being the next step, I don't know of any laws that do that. So I suppose
The door is open.
to anything. But all I can speak to is that
Door
this
is open to
this
a
is
lot of things, but
the
that's not
existing
what we're
law
talking
as it
about
is,
here.
and there's nothing in that provision about that.
And it doesn't automatically expand. If somebody wanted to expand it, they'd have to go through the whole process all over again.
Yep.
This whole process, I'm talking about the whole step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, it's not an easy process. They didn't make it easy to do, and that's why it's not done a lot. But a lot of towns around here do have it, and they do feel that they want to protect some of their assets, historical assets, and that's all what we're trying to do. Is Joan still on the?
Jim, can I just ask one question?
Sure.
And either you or Stacy could answer this. Do you know of any historic districts in the state or even in the country that would make you ask permission to sell your building? or
Never
home?
heard of it.
I've never heard of this.
No.
No. Okay.
I've never heard of it either.
Well,
but-
No.
somebody could. Never mind. All right, Joan.
Yes. Hi, Jim. Yes, Joan Confrati. I'm on the Historical Commission. For one backtrack, I just want to mention, the Historic Commission will weigh in on the mill buildings and try and hope to help model those in a way that's somewhat more amenable to the history of those buildings. But that's not why we're here right now. I understand that. And I think Helen versed it probably better than I can. But I think there are still many buildings in downtown which we would all like to see saved in their historic architecture. We may not notice them so much until they're gone. 128 Main, it's gone. The building that was there is gone and we can't get that back. When the mill buildings are gone, we can't get them back. But I would like to mention too, that are still there. And I think maybe that might, when I go through downtown Ashland, I look at these buildings and I say, wow, those are really just beautiful buildings that have been here for a really long time and have a beautiful history to them. And I would really hate to all of a sudden see a 3, 4, 5-story building in that place and they're just gone. The Federated Church is one. These two buildings are not owned by the town. So the town itself, aside from this bylaw, would have no say over basically what happened there. Except for the planning board, et cetera, that tries to do what they can, but there's a limit. So in Johnstone's has a lot of history, some of it good, some of it bad, but history's history. And when it's gone, you just can't get it back. I also think that incentives are something that makes sense. I think that was a great idea, and I think that it's something maybe that the Historic Commission could look at down the road, trying to set up something that would help in this vein. And I hope that would be the case, that the town would be willing to work with us to make that happen. Those are my thoughts, and thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. A couple of points I'd like to make. First,
you are?
Kurt Hoffman, 58 Hilldale Road. The nature of the American experiment is a dialectic between individual and community rights. And as long as we keep talking to each other and able to voice our opinions on either side or in the middle, we're still who we are. And so this process that we've had tonight, I think, is a good example of that. Now, I wanted to address one other issue, and that is the question of the integrity of the district. While some towns' historic districts are kind of set in a particular time point, ours is not. But what our district, as proposed, will do is to preserve what is termed in the historic preservation community as an historic fabric. That is, that it will represent for future generations of Ashlanders the ongoing process of history from the earliest structures, which would be the Ocean House, I believe.
Probably.
Yeah. To things that fall only within the most recent 50 years, which is what the National Register allows for or defines as historic. And so you would get a sampling from our historic district of that entire historic process going through time. And that is very educational, and I certainly think that it's a good idea to have that kind of diversity in the district. Well, that's all I wanted to say.
It's rather unique, too. And it's just part of Ashland's history that it hasn't, it's grown in different time periods and different things have happened. What's lost has been replaced, and, not trying to freeze anything in, in amber or something like that, but it has to start somewhere. And that's why we're trying to do this. So I'd like to thank everybody here for coming tonight. And before we go, I have to just basically ask the commission, can we get a motion to close the hearing, please?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, commission members? Jim Nielsen, aye.
Helen Nicole, aye.
Thank you, folks. And just a reminder, we meet on the second Tuesday usually of every month. We discuss this every month. You're more than welcome as a public discussion period. And I'm gonna try to have.
But we're meeting on Thursday.
This week, we actually have a meeting in 2 days on Zoom. It's always posted on the town website, and it's always a Zoom meeting, so you don't have to get out of your house to come to the meeting. And feel free to take a walking tour or a guide or a report. Thank you.
Just want to say nice job, Jim. Thank you.